A grandfather lies dead in a field. His skull crushed. Blood soaking into red clay. The killer walks free for 15 years. Then a teenager opens a Bible and finds a letter that changes everything. October 14, 2008. 6:45 a.m. A farmhand walks into a tobacco field outside Raleigh, North Carolina, and discovers 55-year-old Vernon Dale Patterson face down between the rows. His head has been caved in. The weapon is gone. His wallet, still in his pocket. His truck, door hanging open, keys in the ignition. Nothing stolen. No witnesses. No suspect. Just a farmer, murdered in his own field during harvest season. Detectives would spend over a decade chasing ghosts. They'd interview dozens of suspects. They'd follow false leads that went nowhere. They'd watch the case grow cold, file gathering dust, family fracturing under the weight of unanswered questions. But the killer had made one mistake. He wrote it all down. Every detail. Every reason. Every moment of rage that led to murder. And then he hid the confession in the last place anyone would think to look, pressed between the pages of his father's Bible, waiting like a time bomb for someone to find it. 15 years later, Vernon's grandson would open that Bible. He'd read the letter. And he'd discover the horrifying truth. The person who killed his grandfather wasn't a stranger. Wasn't a drifter. Wasn't some faceless monster. It was family. This is the story of a murder hidden in plain sight. A confession buried in scripture. And the moment when silence finally shattered into truth. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? Let's solve this case together. This is the Vernon Dale Patterson case. And it starts with blood in the soil. Vernon Dale Patterson wasn't just a name in a case file. He was a father. A grandfather. A man whose hands knew the weight of soil and the rhythm of seasons. Born in 1953 in rural North Carolina, Vernon grew up on the same land his father and grandfather had farmed before him. 80 acres of tobacco fields stretching beneath endless Carolina skies. He inherited the farm in 1992, and he worked it with the kind of quiet devotion that doesn't make headlines, just steady, honest labor, sunrise to sunset, year after year. To his neighbors, Vernon was the man you called when your tractor broke down. The man who'd lend you equipment without asking when you'd return it. The man who showed up at church every Sunday, sat in the same pew, and never made a fuss about anything. His eldest daughter Linda would later tell investigators, "My father was the kind of man who made you feel safe just by being in the room. He didn't say much, but when he spoke you listened. And you believed him." Vernon had 3 children, 2 daughters Linda and Margaret and 1 son Brian. 5 grandchildren. His eldest grandson Tyler spent every summer on the farm, learning to drive tractors through the fields, helping cure tobacco leaves in the old barn, falling asleep to the sound of cicadas outside his window. Vernon's life revolved around simple things. The land, the seasons, his family. He kept his word. He paid his debts. He trusted people, sometimes to a fault. He never locked his doors. Never had an enemy. Never owed anyone anything. His routine was predictable. He woke at dawn. He worked the fields until dusk. He ate dinner alone most nights. His wife had passed from cancer in 2005, and then he'd sit on the porch with his Bible, reading by lamplight until his eyes grew heavy. Vernon was 55 years old in October 2008. Harvest season. The busiest, most exhausting time of year. The time when tobacco farmers lived on coffee and adrenaline, racing against weather and market prices to bring in the crop. He'd been working alone the night of October 13th, preparing equipment for the final push. His farmhand, Marcus, was scheduled to arrive early the next morning to help load the curing barn. Marcus found him instead lying in the dirt, his blood mixing with the red clay soil that Vernon had worked his entire life. The man who never locked his doors. The man who trusted everyone. The man who'd built his life on honesty and hard work. Murdered in his own field during the season he loved most. Detectives would later ask, who would want to kill a man like Vernon Dale Patterson? The answer was closer than anyone imagined. But it would take 15 years, and a confession hidden in scripture, for the truth to finally surface. Marcus arrives at 6:45 a.m., coffee thermos in hand, ready for another long day of harvest work. He parks near the barn and immediately notices something wrong. Vernon's truck is parked at an odd angle near the tobacco field. The driver's door is hanging open. The keys are still in the ignition. The headlights are off, but the interior dome light is flickering, battery draining. Marcus walks closer, calling Vernon's name. No answer. He moves toward the field and sees it, a shape between the rows of tobacco plants, dark against the red soil. Unmoving. Marcus runs. Vernon is lying face down, one arm stretched out toward the barn as if he'd been reaching for something. His head is matted with blood. His body is cold to the touch. Marcus pulls out his phone, hands shaking, and dials 911. Within an hour, the farm is swarming with police. Wake County Sheriff's deputies, homicide detectives, forensic technicians, crime scene photographers documenting every angle, every detail, every piece of evidence. Lead investigator Detective Sarah Holt arrives at 8:30 a.m. She's a 15-year veteran, sharp-eyed and methodical. She walks the scene slowly, taking it all in. Vernon's body is still in position. The medical examiner confirms what's obvious: blunt force trauma to the head. Massive skull fracture. Time of death estimated between 8 p.m. and midnight the previous night, October 13th. But the scene itself is strange. Perplexing. Vernon's wallet is still in his back pocket. $73 in cash, untouched. His wedding ring is still on his finger. His truck keys are in the ignition. This wasn't a robbery. The farmhouse, 200 yards away, is undisturbed. Door unlocked, lights off, everything in its place. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle inside. Forensic teams comb the tobacco field. They find a single bloody handprint on a wooden storage crate near Vernon's body. It's smudged, distorted, probably useless for fingerprint identification, but they photograph it anyway, bag it as evidence. They search for the weapon. A metal object, the medical examiner says, based on the wound pattern. Heavy. Cylindrical. Like a pipe or a crowbar. But there's nothing at the scene that matches. Detectives find tire tracks near the edge of the property, leading from the dirt road that runs past the farm. Generic tread pattern. Matches thousands of trucks in the area. The tracks lead nowhere useful. No witnesses. No one saw anyone enter or leave the farm that night. The nearest neighbor is half a mile away. Detective Holt stands in the field as the sun climbs higher, heat already building. She looks at Vernon's body, at the blood-soaked soil, at the tobacco plants swaying in the breeze. She thinks, this wasn't random. This was personal. Whoever killed Vernon Dale Patterson knew him. Knew the farm. Knew when he'd be alone. But who? And why? The investigation is just beginning. And it will consume Detective Holt for the next decade of her life. Because some cases you solve. And some cases haunt you forever. The first 48 hours after a murder are critical. Detectives know this. The trail is fresh. Witnesses remember details. Evidence hasn't degraded. If you're going to solve a case, it's usually in those first 2 days. But Vernon Patterson's case defies logic from the start. Detective Holt and her team interview over 30 people in the first week. Family members, neighbors, farmhands, business associates. Everyone who had any contact with Vernon in the weeks leading up to his death. And everyone loved him. Marcus, the farmhand who found the body, is devastated. He sits in the interrogation room, head in his hands, sobbing. His alibi is solid. He was with his girlfriend until 1 a.m. on the night of the murder, then home with his mother. Phone records confirm it. Security footage from a gas station shows him buying cigarettes at 12:45 a.m., miles away from the farm. Marcus is cleared. Vernon's daughters, Linda and Margaret, are both out of state. Linda lives in Virginia with her husband and 2 children. Margaret is in Florida, working as a nurse. Both have rock-solid alibis. Phone records. Credit card transactions. Witnesses who saw them hundreds of miles away. They're cleared. Vernon's son, Brian, is trickier. Brian is 32 years old, living in Charlotte, working construction. He's struggled over the years, financial problems, a gambling habit, a recent divorce. Detectives learn that Brian and Vernon had a complicated relationship. Brian had borrowed money from his father multiple times. There were tensions. Arguments about responsibility. About Brian's choices. But Brian has an alibi too. He tells detectives he was in Charlotte the night of the murder, working a late shift on a construction site. His boss confirms it. Time cards show Brian clocked out at 10:30 p.m. Security footage from his apartment complex shows him arriving home at 11:15 p.m. It's a 2-hour drive from Charlotte to Vernon's farm. Even if Brian had left immediately after clocking out, he couldn't have made it in time to kill his father between 8 and 10 p.m. Detectives verify everything. The timeline checks out. Brian is cleared. So who's left? Detective Holt expands the search. She looks into rivals, other tobacco farmers competing for market share. She finds nothing. Vernon wasn't involved in any disputes. No bad blood with competitors. She looks into Vernon's finances. Clean. No debts. No shady dealings. No connection to drugs or organized crime. She considers the possibility of a random attack, a drifter, someone passing through looking for quick cash. But the lack of theft makes that theory weak. Forensic teams analyze the bloody handprint found at the scene. It's sent to the state crime lab. Weeks pass. The result comes back, too smudged, too distorted. Unusable for identification. The tire tracks lead nowhere. No murder weapon is ever recovered. By December 2008, 2 months after Vernon's death, Detective Holt has interviewed over 50 people, reviewed hundreds of hours of security footage, and chased down every lead. And she has nothing. No viable suspect. No clear motive. No physical evidence tying anyone to the crime. The case stalls. Vernon's family buries him, but they'll never bury the question. Who killed him? The answer is right in front of them. But they won't find it for 15 more years. Vernon Dale Patterson's murder sends shockwaves through the rural farming community outside Raleigh. This isn't a place where people lock their doors. This isn't a place where murder happens. But now it has. And if it could happen to Vernon, a man everyone trusted, a man who never had an enemy, it could happen to anyone. Fear spreads like smoke. Neighbors who used to wave from their porches now watch passing cars with suspicion. Farmers who used to leave their equipment unlocked start chaining everything down. Women who used to walk alone at dusk now carry pepper spray, looking over their shoulders. The local newspaper runs headlines, "Beloved tobacco farmer murdered, killer still at large." And the gossip begins. At the diner on Main Street, people whisper theories. Some say it was a business rival. Someone jealous of Vernon's success. Someone who wanted his land. Others point fingers at Marcus, the farmhand, despite his alibi. He found the body too quickly, they say. How do we know he didn't do it? Some whisper about Brian, Vernon's son. Old rumors surface. Arguments between father and son, money troubles, Brian's gambling problem. Blood is thicker than water, someone says. But money makes people do terrible things. The Patterson family feels the weight of suspicion. Linda stops going to church. She can't stand the stares, the hushed conversations that stop when she walks into a room. Margaret stays in Florida, refusing to return to North Carolina. She tells her sister, "I can't be there. I can't breathe in that place anymore." Brian retreats into himself. He stops answering his phone. He quits his construction job. He moves from Charlotte to Durham, then to Asheville, always running, always looking over his shoulder. But running from what? At the time, no one knows. Vernon's funeral is held on a gray October morning. Over 300 people attend. The church overflows with mourners. The pastor speaks about faith, about justice, about trusting that truth will prevail. But in the parking lot afterward, people aren't talking about faith. They're talking about fear. If they don't catch whoever did this, one farmer says, we're all just waiting for it to happen again. Detective Holt attends the funeral, standing in the back, watching faces, looking for anything, guilt, nervousness, a flicker of something that might give the killer away. She sees nothing. Just grief. And a community that will never feel safe again. Detective Sarah Holt can't let go. By 2009, the Vernon Patterson case has been officially classified as a cold case. The file sits in a storage room with dozens of others. Unsolved murders, missing persons, cases that ran out of leads and faded into silence. But Holt refuses to let it die. She keeps a copy of the case file on her desk. Every morning she looks at Vernon's photograph, the one taken at his daughter's wedding, him smiling in a suit that's slightly too big, looking uncomfortable but proud. She whispers to the photo, "I'm going to find who did this." Her colleagues gently suggest she move on. There are other cases. Active investigations. People who can still be helped. But Holt can't. In 2010 she requests a review by the state's cold case unit. They go through everything, interviews, forensic reports, timelines. They find nothing new. The case remains unsolved. In 2012, Holt learns about advances in fingerprint analysis. She submits the bloody handprint from the crime scene for re-examination. The lab tries new techniques, new software. The result is the same, too smudged, unusable. In 2015 she attends a forensic conference and hears about cutting-edge DNA extraction methods. She returns to the office, hopeful, and requests that the handprint be tested for DNA. The sample has degraded too much. No viable DNA can be extracted. Every door she tries leads to a wall. Holt's husband worries about her. He sees the toll the case is taking, the sleepless nights, the obsessive reviewing of evidence, the way she zones out during dinner, mind stuck on a 15-year-old crime scene. Her captain suggests counseling. She refuses. She drives out to Vernon's farm at night, standing in the tobacco field, now converted to soybeans, trying to understand what happened. She walks the perimeter. She looks at the dirt road where the tire tracks were found. She sits in her car and imagines the night of October 13, 2008, playing it over and over in her mind. Who were you, Vernon? Who came to your farm that night? Who did you trust enough to let get close? By 2018, Holt is nearing retirement. She spent a decade on this case. Her desk is covered in notes, maps, timelines. She's interviewed every possible suspect multiple times. She's followed every lead, chased every rumor. And she has nothing. She keeps a journal. On the last page she writes, "Vernon Patterson deserves justice. His family deserves answers. I have failed him. But I will not forget him. Someone knows what happened. Somewhere the truth is waiting." In 2020, Holt officially retires. But she takes a copy of the case file with her. She continues working on it from home, alone, driven by a ghost she can't shake. And then, in 2023, everything changes. Between 2008 and 2023, the Patterson case generates dozens of tips. Most of them lead nowhere. In 2009, an anonymous caller tells police that a local farmhand named Jimmy Tate bragged at a bar about taking care of a problem on a farm outside Raleigh. Detectives investigate. Tate has a criminal record: assault, petty theft, DUI. He's known for running his mouth when he's drunk. They bring him in for questioning. Under interrogation, Tate gets nervous. He stammers. He contradicts himself. For a moment, detectives think they've found their man. Then they check his alibi. The night Vernon was murdered, Tate was in jail on a DUI charge. Locked up from October 12th until October 15th. Impossible for him to have committed the crime. Another dead end. In 2011, a woman named Sheila calls the tip line. She claims her ex-boyfriend, a man named Randall Burke, confessed to killing a farmer while they were together. Detectives track Burke down. He's living in a trailer park in Durham, unemployed, struggling with meth addiction. They bring him in. Burke is paranoid, twitchy, clearly high. He rambles about conspiracies, about the government, about aliens. When asked about Vernon Patterson, Burke says, "Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Terrible thing." Detectives press him. "Did you kill Vernon Patterson?" Burke panics. He says yes. Then he says no. Then he says maybe. His story falls apart within an hour. He claims he shot Vernon, but Vernon was killed with blunt force trauma. He claims it happened in the farmhouse, but Vernon was killed outside. He can't describe the farm. He can't explain how he got there. Detectives check his alibi. On October 13, 2008, Burke was in Virginia, documented at a hospital emergency room for a drug overdose. Another false lead. In 2014, a forensic analyst suggests the killer might have been left-handed, based on the angle of the head wound. Detectives re-examine all previous suspects, looking for left-handed individuals. The theory leads nowhere. In 2016, a true crime podcast covers Vernon's case. The episode goes viral. Reddit users and amateur sleuths flood the sheriff's office with theories. One person claims Vernon was killed by a cartel over a drug deal. Detectives find zero evidence of any connection. Another insists the murder was part of a satanic ritual. Again, nothing. The case becomes a cautionary tale for investigators. Sometimes there's just not enough evidence. Sometimes the killer gets away. Vernon's family begins to lose hope. His children stop talking about him. His grandchildren grow up without answers. The case file gathers dust. And the truth remains hidden, pressed between the pages of a Bible no one thinks to open. By 2020, Vernon Dale Patterson's murder is a forgotten story. The newspapers stopped covering it years ago. The detectives have moved on. The community has healed, or at least learned to live with the scar. But Vernon's family hasn't healed. Linda, his eldest daughter, suffers from chronic anxiety. She has nightmares, always the same dream. She's walking through the tobacco field, calling for her father, and she finds him lying in the dirt. She tries to help him, but he won't wake up. She screams for help, but no one comes. She wakes up shaking, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. She's tried therapy, medication, support groups for families of murder victims. Nothing helps. She tells a journalist in 2019, "It's the not knowing that destroys you. If we knew who did it, if we knew why, maybe we could move on. But we're stuck. Forever stuck in October 2008, waiting for answers that never come." Vernon's son Brian has spiraled. He's been through 3 jobs in 5 years. His marriage ended in divorce. He drinks too much, sleeps too little. He's estranged from his sisters, rarely returns their calls. When asked about his father, he says, "I don't talk about it." And then he walks away. Margaret, Vernon's younger daughter, moved to Florida and never looked back. She changed her phone number. She stopped attending family gatherings. She tells friends, "I can't go back to North Carolina. That place is haunted for me." Vernon's grandchildren grow up with a ghost in their family tree. Tyler, the eldest, was 10 when his grandfather was murdered. Now he's 25, a college graduate working in Raleigh. He thinks about Vernon often. He remembers the summers on the farm, riding tractors, feeding chickens, sitting on the porch at night while his grandfather read from the Bible. But he doesn't ask questions anymore. The adults in his family made it clear, Vernon's murder is not something we talk about. The farm is sold in 2021. The new owners demolish the old house and build a modern one. The tobacco field is converted to soybeans. The physical space where Vernon lived and died is erased. But the memory lingers. And in a storage box in Linda's attic, Vernon's old Bible sits forgotten, a confession hidden inside, waiting for someone to finally open it. And in 2023 Tyler does. March 2023. 15 years after Vernon Dale Patterson's murder. Tyler Patterson is helping his mother, Linda, clean out the old farmhouse before the final sale goes through. The new owners want the property cleared by the end of the month. They've been packing for days, boxes of old clothes, kitchen utensils, farm equipment, decades of accumulated life. Tyler is in the attic, sorting through boxes of books, when he finds his grandfather's Bible. It's a worn, leather-bound King James edition, the cover cracked and faded from years of handling. Tyler remembers this Bible. He remembers his grandfather reading from it every night on the porch, glasses perched on his nose, lips moving silently as he absorbed the words. Tyler sits on the dusty attic floor and opens it. The pages are thin, fragile, filled with his grandfather's handwritten notes in the margins. Underlined verses. Dates marking significant moments, births, deaths, weddings. Tyler flips through slowly, nostalgic, grieving in the quiet way you grieve someone you lost a long time ago. And then, pressed between the pages of Psalms, he finds it. A folded piece of paper. Tyler unfolds it carefully. The handwriting is familiar but shaky. The paper is dated, October 15, 2008. The day after his grandfather's funeral. Tyler reads the first line, and his blood goes cold. "I killed my father." The letter is a confession. Written by Brian, Vernon's son, Tyler's uncle. Tyler's hands shake as he continues reading. Brian describes the night of October 13, 2008. He writes about the argument, how Vernon confronted him about stealing money from the farm's account. How Brian had been secretly embezzling for months to cover gambling debts. How Vernon threatened to call the police to press charges against his own son. Brian begged, promised to pay it back, swore he'd never do it again. But Vernon refused. "You've lied to me for the last time," Vernon said. "I won't protect you anymore." Brian writes about the rage that overtook him. The metal pipe he grabbed from the barn. The moment he swung it. The sickening crack of his father's skull. He describes the panic afterward. Hiding the pipe in a creek. Driving back to Charlotte. Waiting for the police to show up. But they never did. Days passed. Then weeks. Brian attended his father's funeral, stood beside his sisters, hugged his mother's memory, and no one suspected him. He wrote the confession as an act of guilt, a twisted form of penance. He slipped it into his father's Bible during the funeral, thinking no one would ever find it. And for 15 years no one did. Tyler sits in the attic, the letter trembling in his hands. He reads it 3 times hoping he misunderstood. But the words don't change. His uncle killed his grandfather. Over money. Over a gambling debt. Tyler stumbles down the attic stairs, letter in hand, and finds his mother in the kitchen. He hands it to her without speaking. Linda reads it. Her face goes white. She collapses into a chair, the letter slipping from her fingers. She whispers, "Oh my God. Oh my God." Tyler picks up his phone. He calls the police. And 15 years of silence finally shatter. The Wake County Sheriff's Office receives Tyler's call at 2:17 p.m. on March 19, 2023. Detectives arrive at the farmhouse within an hour. They read the letter. They photograph it. They bag it as evidence. And then they issue a warrant for Brian Patterson's arrest. But Brian is nowhere to be found. He hasn't lived in Charlotte since 2015. His last known address is a motel in Durham, but the manager says he moved out 6 months ago. His phone is turned off. His bank account shows no recent activity. His ex-wife hasn't heard from him in 2 years. Detectives put out an APB, all points bulletin. They contact the FBI. They alert surrounding counties. Brian Patterson is now a fugitive. Detective Sarah Holt, retired but still following the case, gets a call from the sheriff's office. They tell her about the letter. About Brian. Holt sits in silence for a long moment. Then she says, "I knew it was someone close. I knew it." For 3 days there's no sign of Brian. Then on March 22nd a tip comes in. A gas station attendant in Asheville reports seeing a man matching Brian's description living out of his car in a Walmart parking lot. Police respond immediately. They find Brian on March 23, 2023, parked in the back corner of the lot. His car is filthy, filled with trash bags and empty liquor bottles. Brian himself is gaunt, unshaven, clearly homeless and struggling with addiction. When officers approach, he doesn't run. He just sits there, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. They arrest him without incident. At the station, detectives show him the letter. They ask, "Did you write this?" Brian looks at it for a long time. Then he nods. "Yeah," he says quietly. "I wrote it." "Did you kill your father?" Brian's face crumples. Tears stream down his cheeks. "Yes, I killed him. I've been waiting for this for 15 years. I deserve whatever's coming." He confesses everything. The argument. The money. The pipe. The panic. The years of living with guilt, spiraling into addiction and homelessness, waiting for someone to finally find the truth. He tells detectives, "I thought about turning myself in 1,000 times. But I was a coward. I couldn't face what I'd done. So I just disappeared." Brian Patterson is charged with second-degree murder. In November 2023 he pleads guilty. At his sentencing hearing he addresses the court. "I killed the best man I ever knew. I can't bring him back. I can't undo what I did. All I can do is spend the rest of my life carrying that weight. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He's sentenced to 20 years in prison. Linda and Tyler attend the sentencing. Linda sits stone-faced, refusing to look at her brother. When it's over, she tells a reporter, "I lost my father 15 years ago. Today I lost my brother." Justice has been served. Brian Patterson is behind bars. But for the Patterson family, nothing feels resolved. Linda attends every day of Brian's trial. She sits in the front row, arms crossed, staring at the back of her brother's head. She doesn't cry. She doesn't speak. She just watches. When asked by reporters how she feels, she says, "I don't know what I feel. Anger? Relief? Grief? All of it at once. My father was murdered by my brother. How do you process that?" Margaret, Vernon's younger daughter, refuses to attend the trial. She releases a statement through her lawyer, "I have no brother. Brian died the night he killed our father." Tyler, who found the confession, is haunted by the discovery. He wonders if he should have left the Bible unopened, if maybe some truths are better left buried. But Detective Holt, now 72 years old, tells him, "You gave your grandfather justice. You gave your family answers. That took courage." Tyler isn't sure courage is the right word, but he nods. The Patterson family will never be whole again. Linda and Margaret are estranged from Brian, but they're also estranged from each other. The murder fractured something deeper than just trust. It destroyed the foundation of their family. Linda starts a victim advocacy group for families of unsolved murders. She channels her grief into helping others navigate the legal system, supporting people who are stuck in the same limbo she lived in for 15 years. She tells a local news station, "Closure doesn't heal the wound. It just lets you see it clearly. And sometimes that's enough." The farm where Vernon died is unrecognizable now. The old house is gone. The tobacco field is gone. The new owners have built a modern home, planted different crops, erased the past. But the memory remains. Tyler writes a letter to his grandfather, an apology, a goodbye, a promise to never forget him. He drives out to the farm one last evening, stands at the edge of the field where Vernon died, and burns the letter. The ashes drift into the North Carolina wind. Vernon Dale Patterson is finally at peace. His killer is in prison. His family has answers. But the scars of betrayal, of a son murdering his father, will never fully heal. Some wounds don't close. They just become part of who you are. Vernon Dale Patterson's murder forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family, trust, and the darkness that can hide behind familiar faces. The people we trust most can become strangers. The homes we consider safe can harbor secrets. And sometimes justice arrives not through forensic brilliance or dog detective work, but through chance. A grandson cleaning an attic. A Bible opened. A letter falling from its pages. If Brian had never written that confession, would the case have remained unsolved forever? If Tyler hadn't found it, would Brian have taken the secret to his grave? Detective Sarah Holt reflects on these questions in an interview after Brian's sentencing. We like to think justice is inevitable, that the truth always comes out. But it doesn't. Sometimes killers get away with it. Sometimes families never get answers. Vernon was lucky, if you can call it that, because someone cared enough to write down the truth. The Patterson case serves as a grim reminder. Cold cases are never truly cold. Somewhere someone knows. Somewhere evidence waits. And sometimes the truth is hidden in the most unexpected places. Brian Patterson will spend the next 2 decades behind bars. He'll have plenty of time to reflect on what he did. On the moment of rage that destroyed his family and took his father's life. But reflection doesn't undo murder. It doesn't bring Vernon back. Linda Patterson says it best. My father was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened to him. And Brian, my brother, he wasn't a monster. He was just broken. And in one terrible moment, that brokenness turned into violence. That's what haunts me. Not that it happened, but that it could happen. That someone you love could become someone you don't recognize. Vernon Dale Patterson's story is a tragedy in the truest sense. Not because evil triumphed, but because love failed. A father's love. A son's weakness. A family's fracture. His killer is behind bars. But for thousands of families still waiting for answers, the search continues. And somewhere, hidden in a drawer, a closet, or a book, the truth is waiting to be found. After Tyler discovers the confession letter, detectives don't just have a name, they have a starting point for a financial investigation that's been waiting 15 years to be conducted. Detective Sarah Holt, now working as a consultant on the reopened case, makes a call to the Wake County District Attorney's office. She says, "We need to follow the money. Brian claimed he stole from his father. Let's prove it." Within 48 hours, forensic accountants are pulled into the investigation. Their mission: reconstruct Vernon Dale Patterson's farm finances from 2007 to 2008 and find evidence of Brian's theft. What they discover is a trail of deception that stretched back further than anyone imagined. Vernon kept meticulous records. Every expense, every sale, every transaction related to the farm was documented in leather-bound ledgers stored in his office. Ledgers that had been sitting untouched in storage for over a decade. The accountants start with Vernon's bank statements from 2007. At first, everything looks normal. Deposits from tobacco sales. Withdrawals for equipment, seeds, labor costs. Vernon ran a tight ship financially. No debt, modest profits, enough to sustain the farm and support his modest lifestyle. But in March 2008, something changes. Small withdrawals begin appearing. $200 here. $300 there. Nothing alarming on its own. Farmers have expenses. But the frequency increases. By June 2008, the withdrawals are happening weekly. Sometimes twice a week. The amounts grow larger. $500. $800. $1,000. And they're all being made from an ATM in Charlotte, 2 hours away from the farm. Vernon lived in Raleigh. He had no reason to be in Charlotte. But Brian did. Brian had been living in Charlotte since 2007, working construction, supposedly getting his life together after his divorce. The accountants cross-referenced the withdrawal dates with Brian's work schedule. On every single date a withdrawal was made, Brian had the day off or was on a break. The pattern is undeniable. But how was Brian accessing his father's account? Detectives interview Vernon's banker, who's been with the same credit union for 20 years. She remembers Vernon well. She also remembers that Vernon added Brian as an authorized user on his farm account in early 2007. Vernon said it was just in case of emergency, the banker recalls. He said Brian was getting his life back on track and he wanted to help him. Vernon was that kind of man, always giving people second chances. Brian had been given access to help manage the farm's finances while Vernon focused on working the land. It was a gesture of trust, of faith in his son's redemption. Brian violated that trust systematically for over a year. By the time of Vernon's murder in October 2008, Brian had stolen $47,000 from his father's account. $47,000. Drained slowly, methodically, hidden behind the guise of farm expenses that never actually happened. Where did the money go? Detectives dig into Brian's life in 2008. They pull his credit card statements, his phone records, his known associates. What emerges is a picture of a man spiraling out of control. Brian had a gambling problem. Not casual weekend poker. Serious, compulsive gambling that had destroyed his marriage and was now destroying his relationship with his father. Phone records show repeated calls to known bookies in the Charlotte area. Brian was placing bets on college football, NBA games, horse racing, anything he could find. And he was losing. Badly. One former friend tells detectives, Brian would win a little then lose big. He kept thinking the next bet would fix everything. But it never did. He was always in the hole. By summer 2008, Brian owed money to people who don't accept excuses. Loan sharks. Street-level enforcers who break kneecaps when payments are late. Brian was desperate, so he stole more from his father. But even $47,000 wasn't enough. By October, Brian was still $15,000 in debt. The threats were escalating. He needed more money. Fast. That's when he made the fatal mistake. He asked his father for help. According to the confession letter, the confrontation happened on the evening of October 13, 2008. Brian drove from Charlotte to the farm. Arriving around 7 p.m. Vernon was working alone, preparing equipment for the next day's harvest. Brian told his father he was in trouble. That he needed money. That dangerous people were after him. Vernon asked how much. When Brian said $15,000, Vernon's face went cold. Where's the money I gave you last year? Vernon asked. The money you said was for getting back on your feet? Brian stammered. Made excuses. Vernon went inside the farmhouse and returned with his ledgers. He'd been tracking the withdrawals. He knew someone had been stealing from him. He'd suspected Brian for months but had been in denial, hoping his son wouldn't betray him like this. Now, confronted with Brian's desperation and lies, Vernon made a decision. I'm calling the police, he said. I've given you every chance. I've helped you every time you asked. But this is theft. And I won't protect you anymore. Brian panicked. He'd already stolen from his father. He'd already lied. And now he was facing criminal charges. Charges that would send him to prison and leave him at the mercy of the people he owed money to. In that moment, desperation turned to rage. Brian grabbed a metal pipe from the barn and followed his father into the tobacco field. Vernon didn't see it coming. One swing. The sickening crack of metal against skull. Vernon dropped instantly. Brian stood there, pipe in hand, his father bleeding at his feet, and realized what he'd done. He'd killed the one person who'd never given up on him. The financial investigation provides crucial corroboration for Brian's confession. The prosecution will use it to establish motive, timeline, and premeditation. But for Vernon's family, the money trail reveals something even more heartbreaking. Vernon knew. He knew Brian was stealing. He knew his son was in trouble. And he tried to help, right up until the moment he had no choice but to do the right thing. Linda Patterson, Vernon's daughter, reads the financial records with tears streaming down her face. My father gave Brian every chance, she says. Every single chance. And Brian killed him for it. Detective Holt closes the file on the financial investigation and adds it to the mountain of evidence against Brian Patterson. The money trail doesn't just prove theft. It proves betrayal in its purest, most devastating form. If this case moved you, please hit that like button and share this video. Check out our playlist of other solved cold cases. Thank you for watching. And remember, justice may be delayed, but it's never truly gone.